Hello. I just wanted to do a quick tutorial of how to use Foundry VTT as a player. This is especially coming from the fact that we've been using it for a bit, but over time I've added lots of new features via plugins, so I just wanted to go over what the current state of how to use this is to hopefully streamline the game. The first thing I'm going to go over is movement. So I've made a clone of Falconrad, Bill's character, which I'm going to be playing with. So this is not Bill's character initially, but it's all the same abilities and spells as I cloned it, so I can make testing with it. The first way to do movement is if you hold control, you can make measurements, and if you click, you can actually change waypoints. If you start on your character and you make a set of waypoints, each time you just left clicking to make different waypoints. If the path starts on your character, you can hit spacebar and your character will then follow that path. So this is one way to do movement over various distances. However, recently added a thing that you can actually now just drag your character and it'll actually mark the distances moving, and it'll mark them in green as long as they are within your movement speed, yellow if they're in twice your movement speed, meaning something you can do with a dash, and it'll be red if it's beyond the movement speed. So you can just drag your character and it'll move that space and you can see how far it's going to go. If you try to move something that's invalid, meaning through a wall, it'll actually just error and say the token can't collides with a wall and you can't do that. But let's say you did want to move to here, but there's this pool table in the way. How would you do it? Well, with the waypoints with the control, that makes sense, but if you're dragging the character, you can still do waypoints, but the waypoint button is now spacebar. So if you hit spacebar, you can now make various waypoints, and the character can now go around the pool table without problem. So again, that's drag. You can hit spacebar to make waypoints, and wherever you go, you can then, when you release, it will follow that, and it'll track the color coding of the total distance traveled. This is useful for avoiding obstacles and various things. Another thing that was added recently was I added the ability to add difficult terrain. So these hash marks mark these squares as being difficult terrain. So if we drag, we can see each square is 5, but if we drag over the difficult terrain squares, they are 10 each. So if I have 25 feet of movement, I can't actually go to here, I can only go to here because 5 feet, and then the next one counts as using up 2 feet of my movement speed, so it's 15 and then 25, even though this is only 15 physical feet. And so we can see that we can only go to there. However, if we use these waypoints to waypoint around it, we can get past still within the 25 feet. Alternatively, if there's some effect that would cause your character to move ignore the difficult terrain, if you right click, you can deselect this. Yellow means it will use difficult terrain, white is unselected. So now if it's unselected, we can see the character will travel the 15 feet using 15 feet of movement, as opposed to if it's toggled on, that traveling that physical 15 feet will actually cost 25 feet of movement. So with this, you can, say, I can't travel there, but you can now turn off the effects of difficult terrain while measuring, just so you can see what the physical distance is, which might be useful if your character has some ability to ignore difficult terrain. So let's go down now and open this door, but before we do that, let's get ready for combat. So like I said before, it's useful to move most of your things to your hotbar, so I'm going to say let's move any weapons or melee, weapon-based combat abilities down and on your hotbar is useful. Because this is a cleric, I'm going to move the channel divinity for this domain. That is an action to cast, so it's useful to put on the hotbar. And then if we go to the spell book tab, it's useful to click prepared to just see the ones that are prepared rather than all the spells that might be available. And for this character, the combat abilities might be Toll the Dead, Word of Radiance, Resistance, Cure Wounds, and perhaps Inflict Wounds. Some of these other ones might be useful in other ways, but but for the main combat abilities, this is it. And so once we have this hotbar set up, this will streamline things for combat. But before we do that, let's actually take a look at the spell book. If we click on a spell name, it will show all of the text for the thing about the spell, and you actually have to click this thing on the left to cast it. But I actually recommend anytime you're going to cast it, just move it down to a hotbar, because it makes that a little easier to know how to do it. If you have more spells, like maybe have one be set up for your combat abilities and then another one for more utility type things, and in which case you can move all of your spells down to a hotbar at some point. And then clicking them will actually prompt to cast the spell. So this is the spell setup. You can click on the name of the spell to see details about it, or click on the icon over the spell, or drag it to the hotbar to cast them. If we look at the features of your character, these will be all various things gotten by racial or class abilities. Again, you can click on things and see the description of each of those abilities. So, you know, the ability to have dark vision is now listed here, and there's some details about it, and all of those features should be listed here in some way. We look at the inventory, we can see all of the items listed on the character's sheet. And if we go to attributes, this is the main page, and let me go over how to use some of these attributes. So if you're going to ask to make a ability check, let's say a strength check, you'd actually click on the name strength. Here on the left it's showing your modifier and your saving throw modifier for visualization, but you actually have to click on the name to use it. So click on strength, and then you get ability score or saving score. So if we want to do a strength ability check, we'd click it like this, and then it would roll a die, and we'd get 1d20, in this case -1, because the character has -1 modifier to strength and an 18. If instead we wanted to say do a wisdom saving throw, we can see we should get the +5 now, 3 + 2 for proficiency in wisdom saving throws for this character. This also works for all of the skills. So if you want to do, let's say, a perception check, you'd click on the name of perception, and we do that where we've rolled a natural 1, but got 6 because of our proficiency in wisdom bonus. This might even include tools over here. You can click on, say, Mason tools to get a roll for that, in which case we now rolled a natural 20, and we have a +2 because we are proficient in those Mason tools. So this is the overview of most of the things on the character sheet. I'll come back to some of the others in a minute, but these are the main things you'll be doing to interact with the character sheet. Alright, so now let's say we want to open this door. That's actually something you'd actually ask the DM to be able to open the door. You describe doing it, and so then here the door opens. We can see that some corridor leading to another door, and there's sort of no light in here, indicated by the colors sort of fading. This character has dark vision. Let's say before going through, let's actually attempt to set things up by casting resistance. So let's first highlight what you want to target and hit T. We'll see this more in a minute, but the T button on the keyboard is the easiest way to target. There are a few other ways, such in the top left you can select a select target mode, but it's easiest to just highlight and hit the T button on the keyboard. Once your character is targeted, it's now time to cast spells. The targeting here is done for two reasons. There are some automations within the VTT that happen that can streamline things if we do the targeting, which we'll see for this one in particular. But it also informs the DM or maybe other players where you're casting your spells or interacting your abilities, which can be useful. Maybe there's two identical monsters and you want to say which one, the one on the left or the one on the right. If you target it, it removes that ambiguity. So let's cast resistance. So at this point we'll hit resistance, and we see that automatically the character has now been modified to have two icons in the top left. These are the effects of the spell. If we go and look at effects, we see that resistance has been applied, but so has concentrating, meaning that the character has to concentrate to maintain that ability. Okay, so let's say now that we've applied resistance, we want to go through the door. At this point, you'd ask the DM to describe that you're busting down the door, and you open the door to reveal, there are monsters and combat's going to ensue. So at this point, the DM would likely mark everything as being into combat, and once combat has begun, uh, you might be asked to roll initiative. And to roll initiative, you go to the combat tab, and you should be able to see any of the characters that you control, which is likely just one, and their various states that have been modified. We can look at those states by go to effect. Yeah, we already saw that, right? We can hit roll to roll the initiative, and we've rolled an 8, so we can see that the unknown creatures have rolled better than us, so they will go first. So at this point, the DM will start combat, and in which case the enemy creature is going first. Just because this is a tutorial, I'm going to skip their turn and come back around to our player to sort of see how things are going to work. So let's say it's our turn, and let's say we want to go attack this orc. So to do that, we can use our movement. We can see that we can't move forever. We have a limited movement speed, but we can certainly get in range of this orc. And then we want to target it again by just highlighting over it with your mouse and hitting T to target it. This will both show it in the combat tracker here, which you can also change your targets this way if you wanted, but you can also just highlight over the thing to target. You also can actually click the target, the ping button here to see which one, so it'll ping that way, but then you hit T to target or detarget. Let's just try to remove this thing by doing inflict wounds. So if you click on inflict wounds now, it will pop up and we can say which level if you want to upcast it, and this will consume the spell slot. You can deselect this only if there's some reason why you can cast the spell for free for some reason, but for most part you'd want to actually have it consumed, and then we'd hit cast spell. This will then prompt for attack and damage. Inflict wounds requires an attack roll, so let's hit the attack roll, and we rolled a 17. So then the DM will inform you that you've hit, and it actually, there's tools on the back end that because it's targeted on the DM screen, I'm able to see that what the to hit was, so it's quicker to see whether or not it's hit without going and looking at the character sheet of the enemy, in which case you can say go ahead and roll damage. So you hit damage, it'll pop up. If there's any modifiers you need to do, such as it was a critical hit or something, this is the time to do it, but if not, you just hit normal, and that's a pretty good roll, so that's a lot of damage, in which case the DM has a button to then apply the damage to that orc, which in this case is enough to kill it. At which point you can, when you're done with your turn, I recommend you go ahead and hit end turn. In which case now it's the orc's turn, so the orc is going to move up, and the orc is now going to target you. You see the little pink dot means that the DM is targeting you with something, and now the orc is going to go ahead and swing with his axe. Some things are set up that the DM rolls are going to always for attack and damage roll together, where the character rolls will be individual clicks in case there's spells or something you want to do in between, or modifiers. I just want to make sure. But in this case, he rolls a 4, which is a miss, and so that's the end of that turn. If we come back around, it's back to our turn. Let's try a different spell this time. So in this time, let's try casting Word of Radiance. So again, now we don't need to target because Word of Radiance is an area effect spell. So if we click it, we first have to make sure we're selected on our own character actually, and then we can click the Word of Radiance thing, say yes, let's cast the spell, in which case we get a prompt to show what the area effect of the spell would be. So here Word of Radiance needs to be centered on ourselves, and so if we do this, we actually see all of the targets are pre-selected for us because this is happening, and we get a nice visual effect for how Word of Radiance is going to work. At this point, all the enemies who are caught in that need to make a saving throw, so let's have that happen. And the orc rolled very poorly, got a natural 1, so now damage can be applied, so go ahead and hit the damage after the saving throws have been applied, and that's 5 damage due to Word of Radiance, and so the DM will go ahead and apply that damage to the orc, in which case this time it is not enough to kill the orc. After this, you can hit end turn, in which case it removes the effects of the spell and does other cleanup, and now back to the orc. So this time the orc is going to uh, uh, try targeting again, and again swinging with the axe. This time rolls a 14. I don't know whether a 14 would hit, but let's imagine that the 14 does hit in this case. So the damage will get applied, and as soon as we apply the damage, because the character is concentrating, a concentration check automatically shows up here. So you'd want to make sure your character is selected, and then hit the concentration check, which will roll here, and we pass. But notice that not only this, the automation here is because of resistance for checks like this, we can optionally add that. So in this case, we probably don't want to because we passed, but the way resistance works, we could click it. If we do, we'll roll. Our resistance is then removed because we've used it up. It only is a one-time use, and concentration is also removed, and so we see we actually could get a 22. So if you had failed the first one, you can use resistance in that way, which is nice that it sort of reminds you to be able to use that ability. If that automation wasn't there, it'd be fine. We just would have to remember, I can roll an optional d4 afterwards. All right, so that's the orc's turn. It did damage, and the concentration check passed. Now it's back to our character's turn, and now let's try again. Let's make sure our character's selected. Let's deselect and select the enemy. This enemy is now bloodied, so we're going to cast Toll the Dead, in which case this is 1d8, but becomes 1d12 if it's damaged, and because the enemy is damaged and we've selected the targeted rule, it knows to automatically, it can roll the 1d12. The question is whether or not all the damage gets applied, in which case the saving throw needs to happen, but you roll the dice either way, and so now the DM can roll for the saving throw and see we got a 2, so it fails, and so the damage is going to get applied, and the orc is now dead. The combat is now over, and we can return back to a normal state here. So now let's just for completeness, let's say we had taken some damage, we could target ourselves and cast Cure Wounds, in which case we would pop up, this would give healing, and we can see this amount of healing, and it gives actually helpful things on the DM side to immediately apply that healing to the targeted character if you've targeted it. So this is ways that, hopefully combat can be a little smoother. After combat is done, let's say we wanted to take a short rest. This is actually something you can do on your character sheet here. So here you'd hit the short rest button under hit dice, which short rest and long rest are there, in which case we could decide, let's roll one of our hit dice. Maybe we're not happy, we want more of it applied, we'll roll out a second one, and then the combination of those will be how much we heal. We can say whether or not the short rest ends up on a new day. Let's say it doesn't, it'll automatically recharge the per day stuff, and then we hit rest, and the DM is now notified of that, and can apply those hit points healings. And yeah, anyway, this is an overview of the how to use Foundry as a player, and hopefully this can streamline the usage of things, how to use various abilities and whatnot. Thanks for watching.